Meanwhile, as the war with Iran carries on, our next guest says everyone but Trump understands what he's done. Author and staff writer for The Atlantic, Anne Applebaum, writes, quote, Trump has a problem right now, so he wants other countries to solve it. He doesn't seem to remember or care what he said to their leaders last month or last year, nor does he know how his previous decisions shaped public opinion in their countries or harmed their interests. But they remember, they care, and they know. And Anne joins us now. Anne, if you could talk more about what Trump doesn't know about what he's done. And I'm more thinking about geostrategic consequences of the past week.
So, look, you need some background to understand the European reaction to the current events in the Middle East. Trump has, since coming to power, insulted and tariffed American allies. In January, his public and private statements convinced the Danes that he was really about to invade Greenland, and they got prepared for an invasion. They talked about, should they shoot down American planes? Should they kill American soldiers? What would happen if American soldiers killed Danish soldiers? And, of course, all of their allies also came to the same conclusions and had the same conversations. And now the president is acting as if people with those very recent memories should jump to his aid, even at a moment when he himself still can't explain why he launched the war or what is his strategy for ending it. Almost every day he has a different explanation for what he wants to happen. Sometimes he wants allies. Sometimes he doesn't want allies. Sometimes he wants to end NATO. Sometimes the people around him start talking about ending NATO. And then he goes off on a different tangent. And, everyone can see this. Everyone can hear it. And yet the president and people around him are acting as if none of this matters, as if anything that he says should be taken at face value that second.
Yeah, and with a grain of salt. I know that there were several Trump-adjacent reporters who mocked anybody who questioned what he was doing with Greenland. Oh, that's just Trump being Trump. Well, here we see the cost of Trump being Trump to our allies, whether you talk about Denmark, whether you talk about, what was it, 2 or 3 months ago when Donald Trump was openly mocking and ridiculing France's president in front of France's president and the rest of the world. You could see, of course, constantly attacking Keir Starmer when, of course, all he has is praise for President Xi and continued obsequiousness towards Vladimir Putin. I guess to explain, Anne, just how bad it is for European leaders to be embraced by Donald Trump or to be seen close to Donald Trump, look at Italy. Giorgia Meloni has been one of his closest allies, who's actually been quite brilliant in figuring out how to play Donald Trump off of some pressures at home. Now even she is having to distance herself a bit from him because he is so unpopular in Italy and across Europe.
No, I mean, look, if you're in the room with him, you have to expect something toxic to happen. And so there are European leaders who just don't want to go to Washington anymore and stay away. But you're right to point to this issue of public opinion. These are democracies. Trump is very unpopular. He's even unpopular in some parts of the far right. So these are the movements that are theoretically aligned with the MAGA movement. None of them like the war. None of their voters don't like the war. And so you have a situation where, for European leaders, it's now politically difficult to be seen agreeing with the United States, which is a complete, 180-degree reversal from where we were a year and a half ago.
So, Anne, you are, of course, our Central and Eastern European political correspondent. So I'm going to go to you, much like I did for 6 months straight, about the Polish prime minister's race, which you could sense at the end was breaking the wrong way for the mayor of Warsaw. I don't get that sense. Of course, you know so much better than I don't get that sense, though, with Hungary and Orban's election next Saturday. I suspect he's in much deeper trouble than the Law and Justice Party was in Poland leading up to that race. Do you think this may finally be the time that Orban loses?
Yeah, it was the Polish presidency. But yes, you're right.
presidency.
Look at what Hungary has become. So Viktor Orban has been in charge of Hungary on this time around 16 years. During that time, he has used his power as a democratically elected leader to change the nature of the Hungarian political system. He has taken over the institutions of the state. He's taken over the judiciary, the media, the bureaucracy, universities, and thanks to that, and thanks to the unbelievably high level of corruption that's been the result, Hungary is poorer. It's now one of the poorest countries in the European Union. It's certainly the most corrupt country in the European Union, and it's has problems with healthcare, education. He's not even talking about any of that during the campaign. Instead, he's weaved this kind of mythical fantasy about an invasion from Ukraine, that the Ukrainians are going to invade Hungary. He's trying to create a kind of scare thing. I was in Budapest 3 weeks ago. There are posters of Zelensky all over the city with the headline, with the slogan, "Don't let him get the last laugh." And he's not winning. I mean, he's certainly in the opinion polls, and there's a wide range of them. He's well behind in some of the polls, about 20% behind. And now the only question is whether what he will do to either halt the election or change the result or create some kind of outrage.
Well, we know what he's been doing with Russia. We understand, of course, there was the report, I believe it was in The Economist, that Russian security services were talking about a fake assassination attempt to help bolster him in the polls on the way to the election. Also, of course, last week, Michael Weiss with the reporting of a call, an intercepted call between Lavrov and the foreign minister of Hungary, where they're just openly colluding to try to figure out how to do anything. Are you even surprised by how close the last month has shown Hungary being with Russia, and how they're basically shoulder to shoulder?
So this has actually been true for a long time. I mean, you're right, it's a kind of underrated part of the story. Orban now serves de facto as Putin's puppet in Europe. So he blocks European money for Ukraine. He blocks, he's blocked sanctions on Russia, and he is seen widely as using Russian propaganda to describe Ukraine and so on. And the fact that the Russians are supporting him is no real surprise. I think everybody expected that. The surprise, of course, and I'm sure you are going to get to this soon, the surprise is that J.D. Vance is going there supposedly this week in order to endorse him.
No, it's just absolutely unbelievable. Atlantic's Ann Applebaum, as always, thank you so much. Greatly appreciated. And all of Ann's recent pieces are obviously available online right now. Always appreciate you being here.